Before there was a channel, before there was a crew, before millions of people were watching vehicles get yanked out of Utah's red sand desert, there was a woman named Jaymie Gifford working a regular job at a bank in Hurricane, Utah. That's where the story starts, not on a trail, not behind a camera, at a teller window. Matt Wetzel was running his towing business at the time, and like any business owner, he made regular trips to the bank to manage his accounts. That's how the two of them crossed paths. Matt came in as a customer. Somewhere along the way, that changed. The woman behind the counter who handled his deposits became someone he couldn't stop thinking about. What happened next is the kind of story that sounds simple on the surface, but carries a lot of weight in hindsight. Two people from the same small town in southern Utah, building something together from the ground up. Jaymie eventually took her maiden name, Gifford, and became Jaymie Wetzel. She stepped out from behind that bank counter and straight into one of the most demanding jobs a person could take on, co-running a towing operation with a man who, by his own admission, would rather give his work away for free than hand anyone a bill. Most people who watch Matt's off-road recovery today have no idea that's where it all began. They see her occasionally on screen, calm and capable, and assume they already know what she's about. They don't, not even close. Here's something most casual viewers of Matt's off-road recovery have probably never stopped to think about. When the channel posts a crew spotlight, a feature highlighting someone on the team, the language used to describe that person matters. For everyone else, the word employee gets used without hesitation. Crew member, team player, staff. When it was Jaymie's turn, the channel used different language entirely. The spotlight described her as someone who isn't really an employee as much as she is an owner. A general, all-around, get-it-done person. That's not a small distinction. That's the channel itself, the operation Matt built from nothing, publicly acknowledging that Jaymie's role sits above the rest of the team in a fundamental way. It's easy to scroll past that kind of detail when you're watching recovery videos, but it tells you everything about how the Wetzels actually run their business. Matt is the face. He's the one on camera, behind the wheel, narrating the chaos. But the ownership of what they've built, the decisions, the structure, the day-to-day functioning of the entire operation, that belongs to both of them equally. What makes this even more interesting is how quietly it happened. Jaymie didn't build her reputation through viral moments or memorable on-screen highlights. She built it through consistency, showing up, handling whatever needed handling, never making the job about herself. In an industry full of personalities competing for attention, that kind of steady behind-the-scenes ownership is genuinely rare, and the people who pay close enough attention to the channel already know it. The ones who don't are about to find out. Running the billing for a towing operation sounds straightforward on paper. Someone does a job, someone sends an invoice, someone gets paid, clean and simple. It is anything but. Jaymie handles all the billing for Matt's off-road recovery and for Winder Towing, the underlying towing company that keeps the whole business operational. That means every recovery job, every conventional tow, every invoice that goes out the door passes through her. In a business that runs 7 days a week, responds to calls at all hours, and operates across some of the most remote terrain in southern Utah, that responsibility is enormous. And it gets more complicated when you factor in the man she's doing it alongside. Matt has openly admitted in interviews that his biggest weakness as a business owner is collecting payment. Throughout their entire marriage, Jaymie's most repeated question to him has been simple: did you collect on that? And more times than he'd like to admit, the answer was no. He discounted jobs down to almost nothing. He waived fees entirely. He'd do the work and figure out the money side later, or not at all. That's where Jaymie came in. Not just as someone processing paperwork, but as the person making sure the business could actually survive Matt's generosity. Every time he gave a job away, she was the one keeping track of what it cost. Every time he talked himself out of charging someone, she was the one making sure the lights stayed on anyway. It's an invisible role to most viewers, but without it, none of the visible stuff exists. There's a version of Jaymie Wetzel that most viewers never see. Not the one handling billing, not the one driving recovery vehicles across desert trails, but the one raising 3 boys in a small Utah town while co-running a business that genuinely never stops. Jaymie is the mother of Colin, Rhett, and Carter, 3 sons growing up in Hurricane, Utah, with a father whose job involves pulling vehicles out of canyons at midnight, and a mother whose job involves making sure the entire operation doesn't fall apart in between. That's not a quiet household. That's not a predictable schedule. Towing doesn't run on office hours, and neither does off-road recovery. She also stepped into a role that doesn't get discussed much, being a stepmother to Rudy, Matt's eldest son from a previous relationship. Rudy was a prominent part of the channel for years, handling recoveries, building vehicles, and eventually launching his own YouTube channel. Navigating that dynamic, a blended family, a shared business, a very public platform, requires a particular kind of steadiness that doesn't show up in highlight reels. What's striking about all of it is how little Jaymie has ever made it about herself. The channel is family-forward by nature. Matt talks openly about his kids, his crew, his life in southern Utah. But Jaymie tends to operate in the background even within that family narrative, present, essential, and largely uncelebrated by the audience that benefits most from everything she holds together. Most people in her position would want more recognition. Jaymie just keeps moving. And that says more about who she is than any spotlight ever could. For someone who spends most of her time behind the scenes, Jaymie Wetzel has put in more trail time than most people realize. She isn't just the person answering phones back at the shop. When the crew needs an extra set of hands on a recovery, she shows up. When someone needs to get behind the wheel of a recovery vehicle and move it across terrain that would swallow a regular truck whole, she does it without hesitation. When Matt is deep in a canyon at midnight, out of fuel, with no way to get the rig home, it's Jaymie who appears with a fuel can. That particular scenario has happened enough times to become something of a running joke on the channel. But the fact that she shows up every single time is not a joke at all. Her vehicles tell their own story. For a long time, Jaymie drove a rig the crew called the Tangerine, an orange Jeep XJ, the same platform that made the yellow banana famous. It wasn't a soccer mom SUV sitting clean in a driveway. It was a working vehicle and a working operation. She has since moved on to White Lightning, a white Ford Super Duty built for the demands of the job, along with a white Wrangler Rubicon 392 that the crew refers to as the rental Jeep. These aren't casual choices. Every vehicle on the MOR roster has a purpose, and Jaymie's are no different. She may not be the one narrating the recoveries on camera, but she has been present for more of them than most viewers ever notice. Quiet, capable, and exactly where she needs to be. Matt Wetzel is not a man who struggles to fill airtime. He talks on camera the way most people breathe, naturally, constantly, and without much of a filter. But when the subject turns to Jaymie, something shifts. The usual humor is still there, but underneath it is something that sounds a lot like genuine respect. He has described her publicly as a fantastic can-do business partner, someone who never takes business problems personally, no matter how messy things get. In an operation where the problems are frequent and occasionally expensive, that quality alone is worth more than most people understand. The quote that gets repeated most often is the one about money. Matt said it plainly in an interview. The biggest frustration Jaymie has with him is that he'd rather do jobs for free. Throughout their entire marriage, her standing question has been whether he actually collected payment. And his answer, delivered in a deliberately quiet mumble, has been no more times than he cares to count. He laughs when he tells that story, but the way he tells it makes clear he knows exactly what it means. Without someone pushing back on that instinct, someone keeping track of what the business actually costs to run, the generosity that makes Matt so likable on camera would have quietly destroyed everything he built. He also called her the glue that holds everything together, not the engine, not the fuel, the glue, the thing that keeps every other piece connected when the pressure builds and the operation starts pulling in different directions. That's not a throwaway compliment. Coming from Matt Wetzel, that's just about the highest thing he can say about anyone. Jaymie Wetzel appears on camera sparingly. There are no dedicated episodes built around her, no viral moments that sent her follower count through the roof, no merchandise lines with her name on them. By the usual metrics of YouTube fame, she barely registers. And yet the fans who follow Matt's off-road recovery closely know exactly who she is and what she means to the channel. It shows up in the comments. Viewers who have watched long enough to understand how the operation actually works tend to mention Jaymie in a particular way. Not as a background character, not as a footnote to Matt's story, but as someone they genuinely respect. The audience has picked up on what the crew spotlight said out loud, that she isn't an employee, she's an owner, and that framing has stuck. Part of what drives that respect is contrast. YouTube is full of personalities who demand attention. Channels live and die on who can be the loudest, the most dramatic, the most present in every frame. Jaymie operates in the complete opposite direction. She doesn't chase the camera. She doesn't need the moment. She turns up when she's needed, does what needs doing, and steps back without making anything about herself. For an audience that watches enough content to recognize the difference between performance and substance that registers as something real, there is also something quietly powerful about watching a person be genuinely indispensable without ever demanding credit for it. Fans of the channel have watched Matt pull off impossible recoveries for years. Most of them understand, at least instinctively, that someone steady has always been standing just off camera making sure he could. That someone is Jaymie. Millions of people have watched Matt's off-road recovery without ever fully registering the woman who makes it possible. They see the yellow banana, the Morvair, the impossible pulls from places no normal truck should go. They see Matt, but behind every recovery logged, every invoice processed, every late-night fuel run across dark desert trails, Jaymie Wetzel has been there. Co-owner, business partner, the steady hand on an operation that never stops moving. She built her reputation the hard way, not through cameras or clips, but through showing up every single day without asking for anything in return. That's Jaymie Wetzel. Now you know.